And good morning. We're in progress. That's good news. And Steve, again, thank you for that song this morning, which, like always, ties right in with what we have and are talking about. We're in week 239 of John's gospel study, and we're moving quite rapidly. We're in 19 through 24. And let's see, the title here, Two Paths Being Revealed. What the entire almost the entire chapter 18, I would say the entire chapter 18, once they leave the upper room, we're seeing the contrast of two systems, two ways of thinking, two ways of occupying, being alive. We're calling one the power path, and we're calling one the cruciform path. The power path is being demonstrated in numerous ways. So, chapter 18 is like a series of snapshots depicting some action, and we are categorizing those snapshots in two columns, one being the power path and one being the cruciform path. Last week we talked about Peter, um, and Peter representing the power path. Now, Peter is not a bad guy. He is a follower of Jesus, but something wonderful needs to happen in Peter's life. We know that the Peter we're seeing here is a different Peter than the New Testament writers um, show him later, and it's a path of transformation. And this is why we're looking at Jesus as demonstrating the cruciform path. It's the pathway of the cruciform path, which leads one within this realm of transformation. Jesus said it in numerous ways. Probably the most primary way is unless a grain of wheat falls into the ground and dies, it abides alone. I would call that the power path. But if it dies, if something happens, and we're we are coming right into that and discussing what that means, um, dying, um, it abides alone. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. And of course, we see that in Peter, we see that in the other disciples, and we see it through the development, through the history, the New Testament history as recorded, of course, in the text itself. So we're now analyzing these two paths. And I don't expect us to get 2, 3, 4 points and we got it. This is a journey for all of us, and really a gift that's been given to us to look at this at this depth. And so we'll move on. Here is the text, John 18:19 through 24. They are in the court of the high priest, and could I ask one of you guys to read this either from the screen or from your Bibles, either one, um, and then I'll make some comments.
The high priest therefore questioned Jesus about his disciples and about his teaching. Jesus answered him, I have spoken openly to the world. I always taught in synagogues and in the temple where all the Jews come together, and I spoke nothing in secret. Why do you question me? Question those who have heard that I spoke to them. Behold, these know what I said. And when he had said this, one of the officers standing by gave Jesus a blow, saying, Is that the way you answer the high priest? Jesus answered him, If I have spoken wrongly, bear witness of the wrong. But if rightly, why do you strike me? Annas therefore sent him bound to Caiaphas, the high priest.
Okay, thanks, Bob. And I think we all can remember the narrative. Jesus is arrested in Gethsemane. He's taken to Annas, who is the father-in-law to Caiaphas, the high priest, because Annas carries weight within the Jewish community. And he probably requested to see Jesus first. And now the text ends with Jesus will be led to Caiaphas, the high priest. So, from the 30,000-foot view in these verses, Jesus is standing before the high priest, actually Annas, and he's questioned and responds with calm transparency. So there's a contrast there. When Jesus is struck by the officer, he doesn't retaliate, which we would expect, but gently challenges the injustice. I've made this point several times. From my perspective, Jesus is not being intimidated here or veiling his power. That is really important to me. He is revealing cruciform power. So it's not wait and strike back, Jesus. That's the power path. That's the power of this world. Jesus is absorbing what is going on, and within that is power. That's what we're going to look at this morning. So, through the non retaliatory response, the non resistive response is a new power is being revealed. This moment exposes the deeper conflict, not just between peoples, but between two fundamentally different ways to occupy this body, this world. And that's what we're in the midst of looking at. So by way of review, last week, this is going to tie this slide you remember from last week is going to tie in. We're going to look at it from the cruciform perspective. This would be the power path perspective, what Peter has been operating out of his world, that everything Peter knows resides between the two parallel lines, between the distant or the space outside of the two parallel lines, that which is above and that which is below, is outside of Peter's understanding. And this ties into cognitive research, and you can look at all this online. But um, what the general truth is that we all have these set of parallel tracks. We understand through experience what is between the space between, and at any given day, on a good day, our abilities as being human is to stretch those tracks 5 to 15%. It's not a hard number. And I can accept things within that realm. If a person or an idea, here we got an idea and we have a person, if a person or an idea is outside of that realm that I can understand, I reject it. And my being human, what I attempt to do is I've got these little Peter bullets. I tend to want to convince the other or manipulate the idea to bring it into my realm of understanding. That's what Peter's world, this is a simple illustration of how Peter thinks. And so if a person is outside of his understanding, he wants to bring that person into alliance, and he wants to bring, and this is natural being human. This is just the way we operate as being human, an illustration of this. Power is exerted to bring the other into alignment with how the one, and the one is the one with the 15%, needs the other to be. I need something to change in you, so therefore you need to come in. I fire my reasoning bullets, my doctrinal bullets, my I'm not very good at arguing, but I do the best I can to bring that which is out of compliance into compliance. And when I do that, it's a power exertion, and I weaken. And that really ties into physics itself. Whenever power is exerted in any form, there is a weakening of that power. That power has to be replenished. And I'm just saying that's a general truth. And of course, as we move along in this narrative, we're going to see some really interesting twists on this in the person of Jesus. Um, so when I do this, I've exerted power and I weaken. But then power can return. My battery can be recharged through motivated reasoning. I justify my actions through my framework of thinking, or I'm socially supported by other people who think the way I do. Now, this isn't all negative. This, on a positive side, this is why we need the church. We need each other in this realm, uh, but it's used for good and it's used for not so good. And this just represents a dynamic. And power is returned through reasoning and through social input, and my power is restored. Hey, I am okay. That was an okay thing to do. Again, there's a positive side and there's a not so positive side. Now, one comment, a note in yellow. Um, when I'm referring to ideas outside of the text, I've been attempting to stay within John because John is the author. And here I'm deviating a little bit. Not that that's right or wrong. It just lends support to Peter's movement as an author of what he's trying to teach us. Um, Here I'm moving outside the text to another gospel, Mark 10:42, and this example that I provided here for you guys is an illustration of what Jesus was talking about in Mark 10:42. And he says, "You know that those who are recognized as rulers, outside, would be in the both rulers. He doesn't distinguish between Jewish and Roman, but their whole mode of operation is to domineer over, is to get that which is out of compliance into compliance. And so Jesus is talking about that. Now, conversely to that, what he's demonstrating is something entirely different that we're calling cruciform path. And he begins to show that, reveal that, and now I'm back within the book, where he washes the disciples' feet. Remember, right at the beginning of the Last Supper, he, the one who is the Messiah, the one who is the master, takes the position of the servant to wash the other's feet. Remember Peter's pushback on that. He really had a hard time with that. But that is cruciform. That's cruciform, the cruciform path. The one in leadership giving himself over to the others. So we see those two contrasts. We see it throughout the entire book, but it's really coming to a pinnacle point here through what is about to occur. Now let's contrast. Same slide, same characters within the slide, but let's look at that dynamic from the cruciform perspective, not the power perspective. Remember, the power perspective is where Peter is firing bullets to bring the other into compliance, and he is weakened. That's the general idea. Now let's look at it from a different perspective. We have the one. In this case, let's look at it. This is called the one Jesus. This can be represented with your life and mine as well, but let's look at it within the text. Jesus is demonstrating cruciform power. There is, now I realize Jesus is fully God and fully man, so bear with me here. But from the human perspective, there is only some segment of reality that each of us understand. And I'm applying that to the person Jesus of Nazareth here. I realize there's some nuances, but let's not go there. So the tracks exist regardless of our experience. We all have what we understand within the tracks, between the tracks, and that which we don't understand. And there is the one. And we have the other. I'm leaving the idea out because you'll get the point. So we have the other, and the other is out of compliance, out of alignment with how I perceive things to be. So we're setting this up. Now, in this case, this is where it starts to change. And as we look at the narrative, on the pages, we don't see Jesus firing bullets. We see Jesus receiving bullets. He's the one being shot at. He is bound. He has led. He is slapped in the face within this text, and he is the one receiving the blows. And so the bullet is fired by the other. In this case, Jesus is not retaliating, he's not resisting or arguing, he's receiving the bullet. Secondly, the force is received by the one. He's fully absorbing it. He's not diverting it with a shield and blaming something else, like I have done thousands of times. He's receiving it within his being. And there is no resistance, no blame shifting, no retaliation. He's actually receiving that bullet. He's received several bullets from the other. Now, there's a caveat to this, a disclaimer. Obviously, when this happens, Jesus is feeling something. Jesus is not a robot. He's a human being, just like you and I. But for us to dive into how that works at this point, we're not going to do that. We're going to save that till later, because that's it's not a different, it's a complement discussion, but it's too much for one session. So we're going to talk about what it's like to receive this blow and how does that work. And so just bear with me on that. We're going to put that one on hold. As he's receiving the bullet, there's stuff going on inside of him because he's human. But let's not talk about that now. Let's just look at the action of him receiving the bullet, not firing the bullet. Now, when the bullet is fired from any source, whether it's the one or the other, because of, I relate it to what we know is naturally true from just the physical world. That source is weakened. When we fire bullets, when we get into an argument, it's exhausting, and power weakens. So what happens? Thus, power is absorbed by the one from the other. Power is weakened in the other. Power weakens. And there is no return fire to force the other into alignment. That, in a simplistic sense, is what we see being enacted many, many ways before us through the person of Jesus. He's not fighting back, but he's feeling something profound, something negative. So, with that, in this state of, it's kind of life is on hold here. And this is all about degrees. But when this happens, the other is seeing what is happening in the life of the one. Everyone standing around sees what's going on. Jesus is not fighting back like they would expect. He's receiving it, and he's acting in courtesy towards them. They are on the knife's edge of volatility. Um, Peter is volatile. Their emotions are high. Peter whacks off Malchus's ear. The officer slaps Jesus in the face. It is intense. And in that moment of intensity, Jesus is being watched. How will Jesus react? Now, they're not asking that question. They may or may not. But something very different is going on as the other is looking at the one. The other observes the one. I'm reading down here. The other observes the one, and in so doing, is confronted with something beyond their current life experience, whether they are in touch with that or not. And I'm proposing this to you guys from my perspective. I think when this kind of non-retaliatory response occurs, it raises questions. Why is he responding as he's responding? And that thought itself, if I can get in touch with that, it creates an internal conflict. There is a tilt going on inside of the other. Now I'm really slowing this down. To what degree they're involved with this, understand this, I don't know. But I'd say the opportunity is there for the other to get in touch with reality. He's outside of reality right now. They are unjustly treating a man a certain way in violence because that man is challenging their own uncomfortableness as being human, their own constructs. That, from the broad perspective, that's what's happening. Now, movement doesn't always occur. Alignment with Jesus doesn't always occur, but it can occur. And it can occur if and when this happens. It is for true movement to happen. We would call it the movement through repentance. That would be rather than coercion. People can comply, our kids can comply with a religious box and just be in compliance, but many of us have experience and know stories where our kids get to be where we are, in stature, and they go, "Dad, that's a bunch of bunk." So they no longer respond through compliance. They're responding and trying to develop their own framework of thinking. This is not representing that. This is when someone internally decides, I want what he has. I am sick and tired of being sick and tired, and I no longer want to dwell out there. And that is a internal decision that someone makes. And when someone makes that decision, true movement can happen, and it can be life-changing. So when it happens, this type of alignment, it's self-revealing. They get it. And it's self-directed. Now, I've gone through life like you guys. I'm well into my 70s. And what life is teaching me, it does not work to shout louder or to sharpen my pencil and to have a better point. To if my kid would only, if my wife would only, if my dog would only, that doesn't work. That where they are may be true out of alignment with what is real, like the picture, but unless they get it, nothing happens. They have to get it. And getting that is a grace from God. It is a gift, a moment when they humble themselves and they're seeing something enticing, and that movement is called, I want that. That's a wonderful gift. It's happening in Peter right now. Peter is still operating from the power of this world, his way of operation. It's not bad, it's human. But something dynamic right here is about to change in Peter's life. And it's through the avenue of the grain, piece of grain, wheat falling into the ground. And when it changes, it is self-revealing and self-directed. Now, the power depletion, the power is returned, the feeling of, and when I say power, please, I don't mean power to wield power over the other. I mean a sense of wholeness, of integrity, of oneness within our being. Something happens wonderfully when I surrender, if for lack of a better term. That's a Christian word. And if and when this happens, well, bear with me. If and when this happens, where I move from here to here, something in the other comes alive. This is my thesis here. When we give ourselves as a grain of wheat on a moment by moment basis, where I turn my need to fight and defend into giving over, because of my faith and trust in the one who will catch me. I'm not a doormat. I'm choosing out of faith. When that happens, something comes alive. And it's what Jesus calls, if the Son sets you free, you'll be free indeed. I have often said in my teaching tenure that prior to every resurrection, there is a death or resurrection always follows a death. Now, I believe in the historic death and resurrection of Jesus. I do. But it happened once, and I believe it can happen every single day as we allow ourselves to die, to give ourselves over, to surrender. Something new can occur. That is cruciform power. Now, that isn't definitively cruciform power, but it's one aspect of and what Jesus is teaching. So we're moving to summary now. This representative of all of John 18, the snapshots moving back and forth, we see two paths emerging. There's the power path on the left and the cruciform path on the right. And so let's do a few comparisons. The power path is known through applying force to bring the other into compliance with what I need. I've written this in the first person because it applies to me and it applies to you. When I'm attempting to apply force on the other to bring the other into compliance with what I think they need, that is the power path. That's the power, that's the path of this world, the power of this world. In contrast, the cruciform path absorbs force, takes it in. And the reason is to bring healing opportunity for the other. Now, if we can start to grasp this idea, we will then start to understand more and more of why Jesus went to the cross for us. Now, I'm not saying you guys don't, and you probably understand it, many of you more than I do, but this is one way to understand it. Pressure, the power path pressures the other using various means to get the other into compliance. So this is about pressure. And as a Christian, I've become very good at using pressure through verses and to get the compliance that I think is needed. Now that has changed through the years, definitely, but I know that within the context of my Christian faith and in the context of the church. In contrast to that, the cruciform path endures the pressure. We're talking about pressure in point two, regardless of the other's choice towards compliance. That's how Jesus is treating those there in the guards, those arresting him. It's how he treats his disciples. It's how he treats everyone. It's our choice. Winning on the left is recognized as overpowering the other to bring the other into compliance, as that first slide set shows us. To bring alignment into the other, then I can accept the other. It's all about getting the other to do what I think is needed. Or on the right hand side, winning. Now we're moving from pressure to winning. Winning is recognized through continuing to love, which disarms and invites the other to true life. I can't change you, and you can't change me. It's not going to happen. We can be used as an instrument for dialogue, but true change occurs when something inside of me wants something different. On the left-hand side, this is about fear, creates fear in the other to comply as needed, defined by me. Fear is a big motivator. I think it's a negative motivator, but oftentimes I see this so much within our experiences within the church, inside the church and outside the church. There is a fear component that puts people on edge through doctrinal exactness or whatever. I think it's really unfortunate. It creates fear in the other so that that other will bring into compliance motivated by fear. And that is really substandard. That is really too bad. On the other hand, it's not about fear, it's about creating space. Jesus is creating space through his nonviolent response. He's creating space, opportunity in the other. It's the other's choice. He can't make them do anything. Well, he could, but he doesn't. Create space for the other to experience something new. And we call that growth. That's how we grow. And that growth is always through the avenue of something needs to die so something new can live. Otherwise, we're just rearranging our furniture. So, summary. That was a preliminary, now summary. I put it into two statements. Again, thus far in chapter 18, there's going to be more, and there's going to be more nuance to this, but this is really the summary of the general idea of the two paths. On the left-hand side, the power path, this path believes, and again, I've personalized it, if I can apply the right kind of an amount of pressure, I mean, I've put myself in the chair of knowing, and if I can apply pressure on you, the right kind and the right amount, I can get you to comply with what you need because I'm in the chair, or in our Christian way we do things, or what I think God needs you to be. I'm defining what you need, and from a God perspective, this is what you need. I've done it. Uh, I've thought that way many times. This path, on the contrast, the cruciform path believes if I absorb your pressure, your bullets, which is another discussion, the possibility opens for you to experience what is actually true. When we talk about Jesus dying for you on the cross, this is how I frame it. He's allowing this to happen. He's creating space um, to experience what is actually true. And in what is true is life. Thus, if the Son sets you free, you'll be free indeed. And he's talking about the here and now. One more statement from each side. This is a therefore based on what is above. I read this path believes if I apply the right kind of amount of pressure, I can get your compliance with what I need you to be or what I think God needs you to be. Therefore, the power path seeks to apply force towards the other to accomplish a desired outcome, which I define. That's tried to make that as concise as possible. I'm the one in the chair. I'm the one within doctrine, in our circles, doctrinal purity, and I'm defining what you need in order to be in compliance. On the right-hand side, it began with this path believes if I absorb your pressure, the possibility opens for you to experience what is actually true, and in what is true is life. It's all about life. Therefore, the cruciform path allows the pain into oneself. Wow, that is a statement. Nobody likes that. This path is fueled by a love which is beyond one's own ability. Dave Brown spoke of that love last week through an experience he had with his daughter. He said the words, I had a love that was beyond my own ability. That is what we're talking about. It leaves the door open for the other to experience new life. I don't have to control the other. I only have to be there to love the other. And I use that love, or I utilize a love that is beyond my own ability. So as we move to table time, we're going to talk about this here. I'll feel the same, nothing new here. It's just a review, but we've got some questions because I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this. And I'll finish. Here's what we just talked about, and the questions are above. Let's discuss these two paths. By now, we should see a real contrast between the power path, the kingdom of this world, and the cruciform path, the way of Christ, the way of the grain of wheat. And let's talk about these two. What tensions do you recognize? And that could be in the form of questions. So there's tension in this. What questions do you have? Or what intrigues you about this, looking up from the other side? So I'm going to turn the floor over to you guys and feel free to respond however you wish.
You know, I've always struggled with what does it mean to glorify God?
Yeah.
And I come from a background of the Reformation, and the church fathers back in the time of the Reformation wrote down through their catechisms questions and answers of what the Christian life looks like. And as you were presenting this, Mike, the the first question in the Westminster Catechism came to my mind. The first question is, what is the chief end of man? Or what is the purpose of man? Why did God create
Right.
us?
Yeah.
And the answer is the chief end of man is to glorify God and enjoy Him forever.
Yeah.
And I thought, as you were presenting, the cruciform path, as you've laid it out, is a huge help to me in understanding what glorifying God means.
Mhm.
You know, the attraction, the power of God to attract people and bring them into a repentance
Right.
kind of thing.
Yeah. That's so good. Thank you for saying that. That's really kind of you. Thank you. Appreciate that. And I couldn't agree more. How does one love God? Well, we've got the example of Jesus, and
Mhm.
this he is loving God right at this very moment. For the joy that was set before him, right, Bob?
Yep, that's right.
He endured the cross.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's not Ginger. We know it's not Ginger. We know it's Carl.
Yeah, it's easier just to log in and try to change the name and all that and get lost in the
No worries.
computer world. As you were talking here, Mike, I was just wondering, uh, looking at my notes here and the power path, exerting power over others. Um, it brought up the question of how does this fit into uh, evangelism. It seems like
Oh,
evangelism has died in the world today. There's not very many churches, to my knowledge, that are reaching out and presenting the gospel. And as the gospel is presented, are people uh, exerting power over others as they present the gospel? Uh, it seems like uh, we have something to offer the world, and how can we uh, present the gospel? How can we present the good news if we don't, in in some form, get on a power path? And by, what I mean by the power path here is presenting scriptural verses to support what we believe. And when we do that, are we getting on a power path uh, as we do that? And I worked with evangelism explosion for a while, and I think to get off of that power path, we asked several questions, and then we shut our mouth and listened. I guess maybe I'm answering my own question. There's, rather than getting on a power path and bullying the gospel through, we we get on a path of asking questions, and maybe humbling ourselves and waiting, ask a question and wait and see what the other person says.
right.
And I could give you an example of those questions, but
Yeah. If you were to die today and God were to ask you, why should I let you into my heaven? What would you say?
exactly, yeah.
Yeah. So Okay, you've raised a great point. Does anybody want to respond to Carl?
I was watching. I watch a lot of YouTube, and last night an old teaching of Billy Graham, a presentation by Billy Graham, was one of the videos, and I had forgotten how good he was
Yeah.
at evangelizing. I mean, he was just masterful from the opening jokes and anecdotes to his self-effacing. I'm an old man, and I have to keep notes now, and blah blah blah. But he brought you from a place of I'm here because my company sent me. It was a technology seminar that he was teaching at,
Hmm.
and he took you from a place where I'm here because as part of the conference I was assigned to I want to be a Christian, Billy. How do I do this? Um, and I think like what Carl was saying, I mean, there's a line between wanting to win and so you can have, scalps and pelts to show your church, uh, and then wanting to make people aware of what God has for them. Intention is a big component in this power path. Uh, all of the gospels are, the book of Acts is written from a point of I'm going to persuade you into this new way. Paul's, talking to Agrippa, that was almost persuaded me, Paul. And these things written aforetime are written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort might have hope. I mean, what's the point of writing a whole Bible if it's not to convince you that what God has to say in his word is correct, and what you're thinking that's contrary to that is not correct? It's not a power play in a negative sense. It's a making you aware, and I think what Carl was saying is if you're out there evangelizing, you're not doing it, hopefully you're not doing it to win. You're
Right.
doing it to make people aware that there's more to life than what they have come up with thus far. And so as much of my life has become it, my answer to almost everything now is it depends. If you say is the power path wrong, it depends. If you're cutting Malchus's ear off, in that instance, it's wrong. But if you're persuading Apollos that the baptism of John is not fully where we're at now, then it's right. It just depends.
Good. Thank you, Vince, for responding to Carl. Yeah, it's
Yeah,
super helpful. Yeah.
great answer. Yeah, I like that. Help what Vince said there to help people become aware of. Uh, and I want to get back to that point of helping people to become aware. Uh, that's an area I think I haven't operated in for a long time. I hate to say.
Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Carl.
This
Other
is
thoughts, fellas?
this is it from a maybe slightly different angle, but from scripture, because it dawned on me, in Matthew and Mark. My cheat sheet here says also in First Corinthians, Jesus says, and this is the Last Supper. And as they were eating, Jesus took bread and blessed it and broke it and gave it to the disciples and said, "Take, eat, this is my body." Is that a command or is that his plea? For us as believers, he's commanding us to do that. But for non-believers, the cruciform path, this is a plea to please take
Yeah.
and eat. I have this gift for you. but never in his ministry nor in ours should we. And it's the classic example. You've got someone that in your heart and your mind, you know that there's an essence of a tremendous believer, tremendous gifted person there who has not accepted uh, what we know is the reality. And we've got this person, and we get to a point where we just want to say, take this. You've got to take this, And that's not the way Jesus tells us to do it. It's hard for us as men to have the patience to let go and let God. We go as far as we can. It's the horrible, horrible trite phrase. You can lead a horse to water,
Mhm.
but you can't make it drink.
Mhm.
So to me, those verses, even in the Last Supper, is a representation of the cruciform path.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. Another great comment, Dave. Yeah, thank you. That is so true.
Uh, from my experience about how I came to the Lord, uh, it was mainly there was a number of factors, but uh, the major factor was the pastor of the church didn't uh, throw stuff there. He actually got me together, and used to talk for hours, and he would just listen to my doubts of why I had and why I hadn't come to the Lord. And eventually, it just got me to come to grips with those things. And he put me in situations where I would participate in with other believing Christians. Uh, and he would do things like put me in charge of a Sunday school class when I wasn't even a believer, so that I would study scripture and so forth. It was a powerful thing because it, I got to see that, yeah, I had those questions, but these believers also had questions, and they treated me in that class with the love of Christ. In other words, didn't worry about whether I was right or wrong in terms of my questions. They just listened, and in fact, some of them had the same questions themselves. And the other major thing was he. I used to participate in the Passion Play, and one year I was a disciple, and another year uh, uh, I was actually the soldier that actually uh, put the vinegar and Christ on the cross, kind of a thing. And I watch actually believers and able to work out all this thing in the Passion Play. And then a third big factor was me is he asked me to give a talk to the church. It was like a sermon or whatever. No, I'm sorry. It was actually somebody asked me to do my testimony, and in that testimony, I couldn't give the fact that I was a believer, but I could also talk about love for my mother, my grandmother, and then my wife. And that also was a big factor in terms of me making uh, being born again actually through that process. So anyway, it was kind of a way that I think people don't usually come to the Lord, but that's the way I came to the Lord.
Well, Tatsi, again, like the other guys, thank you for sharing that. And as I hear you talk now, and I would like your feedback on this, what I heard you saying is that you were brought into a community and you realized you were a new member or a new place within that, and it was their response that you defined as love that, and of course there is truth, there's content within that, but it was their human response that really drew you into faith in Christ. Is there more to it? than that, or am I seeing what you said correctly?
I think it was actually, yes, the love of the congregation in general that brought me into that. And this is actually a conservative old
Yeah,
Southern Baptist church. Uh, so in other words, at my baptism, I invited the people from work, who were the majority of them were black. And
yeah,
so when they walked into that church for my baptism, it was like, oh, this is something different. So anyway,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, it was
Good,
actually,
good,
yeah.
good. Thank you. Thank you. All you guys, thanks for sharing this morning. Um, I'm just going to make a couple closing comments. Carl, you brought up that great question. And one thing I've been dwelling on, methods are secondary to the time that they're in. And when evangelism explosion began in the 70s, it was a part of culture and people were ready and acceptant. You could actually have dialogue. And there's been a lot of water under the bridge. Not that we want to throw out this system or that, but gee, there's been water under the bridge. How can I exemplify Christ and the good news in a way that the modern hearer can hear it? Because I, for one, like I think everybody on this call, it is good news. And how to explain, how to get that across. Now, I've landed on basically two things that are non-negotiables for me, and I think I'll just submit this to you and then we'll end, is that I think God loves everyone through Christ. So there is a general movement. God is love, and our message is one of love. And all people, I think all people want to embrace the fact that they are loved. And in order to do that, people need to be seen and they need to be heard. And I think where we could really do some good thought would be maybe I need to listen more rather than jump in there with a prescribed content that depicts what how I understand the gospel. Evangelism to explosion doesn't it's not designed to do that, but it could really be a bridge of how do we gain an a conversation with people to enter in, so it's not a you need to do this like the power path, but um, an engaged conversation for people to listen. So that I kind of rambled there, and I would say thank you, Carl, thank you, Dave and Bob and Vince and Totsi, all you guys for jumping in there this morning. We're not going to meet next week. Well, you can, but I'm going to be gone. I'll be um, out of reach next week, the 30th, but we'll be back to meet the 6th, and we'll pick up where we left off today and to continue this down this path, analyzing these two ideas, the power path and the cruciform path. And of course, we know where this story is going. And anyway, that's what we'll do. So thank you for joining in, guys. Bob, I really appreciate your comment today and your compliment. Thank you. So
Well, thank you, Mike. It was excellent. Excellent teaching this morning.
thank you. All righty. We'll see you guys. We'll see you guys in 2 weeks. I guess you'll probably meet next week. And bye. And bye for now.
So long. Thank you, Mike.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve.
The cruciform path and the other path was what?
The power path.
Power path and the cruciform. Okay, thank you.
The power path, Carl, is the one I really know pretty well.
Yeah.
We want to downplay that one.
Win the
Yeah.
argument at all costs. Win the argument.
See you in 2 weeks.
See ya.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.